much, I just wanted to talk about this really quick. So I went ahead and added my own awesome Go list and put all my stuff on it so I can keep track of what I need to fix, and that's what we're going to be doing tonight. But you can go out to check this out, rbxrob/awesome-go. And I put some stuff on there besides mine. I put GDA Moore's T-Cell and T-View on there. Really important. No, those are just GitHub tags. You should always tag your Git repos. Yeah, people don't tag their Go repos all the time, and it's really bad because it just makes an anonymous tag. It's really bad. You should always tag your Go repos. I decided to factor out a bunch of the stuff that was in my Bonsai and put them in their own packages, which you can go to, as I just mentioned, on Awesome Go. They're listed there. 3 of them are not finished. We'll be finishing those tonight. The first one we're going to finish is the traditional data structs package. And that's this one here. There's an implementation of a stack. That's all done. There's an implementation of a tree, which we need to add. I've already written it. I just want to clean up the one I've already written and make it more of interface friendly. And then there's the actual node implementation as an interface, not just a struct. So this is actually really important because, and I did want to add too, I went ahead and made it so that if you implement visits, async and visit, these are methods that have already been written on the struct to go to every single node in a node tree in a predictable way. I've already done the interface. It's going to be implementing this interface and the scaffolding for the struct from the stuff that I've already written that I know works without running into struct interface incompatibilities. Node tree is we can talk about that. I'm going to be coding a lot of it, so as I do, I'll talk about it. If you're trying to learn about data structures and algorithms, this is the place to be for you tonight. The rooted node tree is one of the most important data structures in all of computer science, and we're going to be spending a lot of time in it. And it has a linked list built into it, so you can get kind of both. It doesn't have to necessarily be a tree, but it generally looks like a tree. I mean, you can have stuff branching out in any direction; doesn't matter. It just like a star or something, but people tend to think of it as a tree, and thinking about what's above it and what's below it kind of helps you organize in your mind what's going on when we talk about this. Click here. So the tree specifies a rooted node tree that's made up of node implementations. The tree holds metadata about the node. So we have a tree that kind of encapsulates the whole thing. The most important thing in the tree is the root. That's the number one node at the beginning of the rest of the thing. The other stuff is just string names for the integer types. Type that's an integer, so it's not very big. And we can set that type. We have a value, which can be anything. That's kind of the payload. And a way to get all the nodes, tell whether it has any nodes at all, and a number of other things related to that. Add them, destroy them, and cut them out. I was saying, I've already done this whole thing and got it working many times. Here's the WA code. It's all here. All this code is already here, but I want to refactor the code I have so that it works better as being used by the interface without overhead. That is just an implementation of an interface where you specify how it's supposed to behave. You don't have to document the struct. You can just document the interface and then tell people that that's how it behaves. And then you're good to go. That's all you need to do. Implementation of node. But I think that's kind of an anti-pattern because I think using a init is more important. Being able to allow people to use a init. And it's more idiomatic Go to do that. Because you don't really want to force people to do your initialization unless they want. So we had a little bit of rabbit hole. We made this Go iMethods bash filter, which just takes an interface and converts the interface into this so that you can go in and fill them out without wasting too much time writing it. It did take me about 15 minutes to write it, but I can use this forever now. It's always there. How would you recommend? And for an open source project and streaming, how does that relate? I think it's hard. I think the best way to build an open source project is just get a bunch of buddies together and then start making something. And that's the only way I've ever done it. I've never been involved with a big open source project other than making contributions. I can tell you, somebody you do want to ask is KWINT, Quint. If you ever see them here, they're one of the free and open source FOSS developers and organizers of the conferences out there. So they would have better information for you than I would. I do think streaming has been a big thing. In fact, the stuff that I've been doing since I started streaming 2 years ago, the projects that I've had have had a lot more visibility and we've had a lot more input. Oh my God, I've been so much better because of the input from the community. So I do agree. Definitely stream if you're going to do any kind of open source development. I think you should stream all of it as much as you can. Now, granted, I have to not stream sometimes because I can't code and stream at the same time. And I mean, sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. depends on what I'm doing, but if it's complicated, if you do start streaming open source, please make sure I know and post that in the Discord and let us know about it so we can like call on other people to come help you. There are a lot of people who need projects. I'm like, I don't know what to work on. And there's like a ton of people that are starting projects that would be open to having beginners help them. So, let us know. Just a reminder of the task ahead. We've got this made. We're not going to be implementing all of these, giving them return values and pulling over the code that's already been written in the other structure that I have and resolving the interface dependencies and things like that so that works. We're going to be doing that for the next 54 minutes in this POMO session. So that's what we're going to fill your interfaces, put a comment here saying what it is. I do think referring to the interface is important, so I think it's worth having a thing there. Plus, you'll get the credit where, when whatever the grader thing is, it'll let you know that you passed, So I think it's worth it. Same with 19. N.V. N is the receiver, it's called. So we'll change that, make sure it matches. 9.10, we got a problem with the receiver still. There we go. N.T. We have to do. And now we fulfill the interface. It doesn't do anything yet, right? It's just all default values. But we need to make absolutely sure that our struct has properly fulfilled the interface. That's the very first thing to test. Otherwise, you're going to be having interface fulfillment errors all through, and it's going to mess you up. You run into so many hurdles eventually that you start to you realize, I don't want to do that. That's gonna end up in a foot gun later, or I'm gonna run into a wall right later. And just writing code is the only way you can get this experience. Honestly, you can't learn it from like reading about it or watching a video. So okay, what are we doing in this POMO? We're gonna be making this readable. So that is the default representation of a thing, a struct, and we're gonna make it look like pretty JSON. That's the first thing we're gonna do. By implementing a stringer interface. One very serious path into cybersecurity is to go into the military and ask them to go into cybersecurity. And I want to hear everything you have to say about that, because I think the military has done a phenomenal job training technologists based on people that I've met over the course of the last 20 years, 30 years. You have to be have certain capabilities or something, right? Yeah. You know what? I can still work for the NSA if I wanted to. Yeah. There's no age restriction on them, or the FBI. Yeah, if you're an analyst, chagrin, according to Adam Ruins College, that 30%, you make 30% more money at every level of your career if you have a degree of some kind. So in the United States, it's still preferable to have a degree of some kind just to have the piece of paper, but they don't care where you go. Now, having said that, I do want to say that there's been a lot of companies that come together. In fact, a lot of Silicon Valley companies came together and wrote an affidavit saying we do not require college. One of the big ones was IBM that said as long as you have equivalent training and certification, military or otherwise, you can just work here. And they created their own high school, K through 16, in order to just go right to work for them. It really is. It's just so much more important to have a GitHub than anything else. More important than LinkedIn. You can put your profile on there, and more important than a landing page for the web. But having a nice web page is also fine. The guy that got this junior job, 100,000 K, that's what he did, and that impressed the people all the time. People don't put the personal hobbies on things. Do not forget to put your personal hobbies on there. Your personal hobbies show what you're passionate about. It gives you something to talk about in an interview, and you can actually present trustable proof, verifiable proof you know what you're doing. So what about your personal blogs and stuff like that? These things are good too, because they show that you're interested in the topic and you can write about it intelligently. It also shows that you know how to communicate. So I think you should be doing it anyway. RWX, the W in RWX is writing. Just make a blog about what you do and talk about it. Another really important thing about having a blog is, particularly if you're interested in academic things. I have a guy who went off to Columbia who had nothing to show for his 4 or 5 years with me because he was so random. He would do tons of different things. He was learning all the time, but he had nothing to capture. Please keep a running log, personal log of what you're writing about, what you're discovering, and everything like that. Like as if you were like a scientist or something, and then you can share what you have, and then somebody else can read that and they'll see, oh my gosh, this person's interested. They might have a lot of things to show for it, but this blog shows a lot. I don't know. Are soft skills more important than tech skills in the industry? I don't think they're more important. I think they're as important. I don't even think you should call them soft skills, but people do. If you can't communicate, you can't work. You can't justify your existence. You can't do anything. This is true. You can fake it till you make it and brand yourself into a job, into like a massive following of people and crazy amounts of money and not be worth shit. Happens all the time. There are people who have the opposite of imposter syndrome who like get their name out there. That's it. It is what it is. It's just not cool that that's true, but it's always been true. The people who you remember who invented the transistor and everything, all these people, it's because they marketed that shit. Because they marketed that shit. You know, and they control history. And so I hate to say it, but you have to control your brand. You have to push your brand. You have to know about your brand a little bit, and minimally, you have to know how to market yourself in your resume. If you don't know how to do that, get a contractor to help you. Well, how do I put this? I think it's more important. I think a lot of people agree. I think it's more important not that you market yourself, but that you create quality relationships with people. I think if you create quality relationships with people just in life while you're working and stuff, you will always have a job and you will find a job as long as you have the skills because of networking. Because you're already building relationships with people who trust you, who can vouch for you, and that care about you, they're looking out for you. Those are the kind of people you want to get in your camp. And yes, I think streaming and social media and that kind of thing helps. I also find that less manipulative, right? I find it to be far less manipulative. You know, if you're a perception manager, I hate perception managers. I just hate them. You can smell that shit anywhere. I hate it. You know, if you ever see me make a video and the thumbnail is this, then you know I've lost my 4 years in college screwing around, having them not know what to tell you to get a job and say, oh, you'll figure it out. And then no, and then you're going to go watch play around with Linux distros for 2 years while you figure out that none of those are relevant and you really have to learn Red Hat even if you hate it and you have to do something to get a job. It's like, how much time do you have? I don't have that much time. How to manage your time. So when people stream about things and playing around with Arch and doing all these things that I did in my 20s, I just feel like it's going to cost them in the long run, as long as they can do so quickly and they have lots of free time or whatever. Okay. What I don't like is when people fake who they are. When people put on some extra personality that they think is going to get them more views. And that happens all the time. And it's really, really transparent. And usually. And that I don't like. Never have.
Some people might say, hey, learn C or C++, which is a great answer.
Don't say Russ. Don't say Russ. Don't say Russ.
Right now,
don't say Russ.
Is Golang.
I love you. I knew I loved him. I knew I loved him.
And it gives you the same expressiveness that Python
yeah.
has, but the same power and core functionality that C or C++, some of those lower languages.
Yeah, this guy knows his shit. This guy knows his shit. That's the honest to God truth. I don't care about you. I just want what you can give me. Is it true? At least I'm owning it. All right. So, and I'm going to make a quick little summary video on this before I cancel everything. So, they say in Go, pass interfaces return structs. And I think I've hit this problem again. I'm going to throw this whole interface out, and I want to tell everybody why. So let me explain that. If you are going to, if you think you want an interface because you just want to make it usable by some other person someday, you're probably wrong. But how do you know you're wrong? How can you tell you're wrong? And I've been burned by this so many times I've lost count. And I feel like the biggest indicator is when your interface violates the cardinal rule itself of Go, which is pass interfaces and return structs. You cannot return something. If you have to return an interface and you cannot return a specific concrete type, you're going to have trouble because they won't be able to use that thing later somewhere along the line. I had to have a structure right now. Because now when I pass in this node, I have no internal knowledge about how the implementation of node has been done. I'm only allowed to call this stuff from an interface, and that bypasses all the efficiencies of linked lists and graph trees and all that stuff. What I say is that I mean, I've tried this like 3 times now. This is like, yeah, I've done this over the last 2 or 3 years. Every time I try to do a node tray, I always do the same thing. I'm like, there's got to be a way to write an interface with this. Even with generics or something, there's got to be a way for me to do it. And I think the answer is still no. The answer is use a struct. Someplace down the line is going to be able to do it more efficiently. Picking between interfaces and structs has got to be deciding whether to abstract the thing you're making is got to be one of the hardest decisions in all of formal strict type computer programming. You don't have to do that in Bash. Who gives a shit?